Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On this show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, joint ventures, strategic alliances, real estate, affiliate and sponsorship deals, franchising, and more. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for over 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the Deal Quest podcast. Let's get started. Rich Manders is a serial entrepreneur, a lifelong learner, and student of business. At Freescale, he's dedicated to helping other CEOs and their leadership teams scale their businesses and their personal freedom simultaneously through coaching and development. If you're a leader of a business and have found yourself feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or frustrated by the business and your team, he can help. He and his team can help. Listen, the bio includes a list of, coaching over 50 companies with huge growth rates. And, his background as a founder and a leader. We know each other through Entrepreneurs Organization. And Rich is one of these guys that has unbelievable wisdom. And I'm happy to have him on the Deal Quest podcast. Welcome, Rich.
Thank you, Corey. It's a pleasure to be here.
So listen, before we get into all that you do with clients and how that impacts their ability to do deals more successfully and exit at higher multiples, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because I'm guessing I don't know if there were any entrepreneurial, things in your mind back then, but certainly maybe coaching businesses at the level you do and the success you had probably wasn't it back then, but you tell me.
No, this is a dream job that I didn't know was in the dream when I was a little kid. When I was a little kid, I loved taking things apart and figuring out how they worked. Okay. And so that was the beginning of my career. And so I actually, from that, became an engineer. That was because I was very curious how things worked, especially electronic things. And so when I got older, I actually learned electrical engineering as my first part of my career.
Wow. It's funny. It reminds me, when I was growing up, so I have a brother who's 5 years younger than me. And he had that kind of skill where, literally, he'd be 8 years old. And, back in the days when you had transistor radios, things like that, these things would break and he would somehow take them apart and put them back together and they'd work. And I was smart in other ways, but that, I had no ability to do that. And he'd be the kind of person who would put stuff together without the instructions. I'd be reading step one, step two, he would look at the thing and he would know, And he actually became an architect. So, which is,
This is another part of taking things, putting them back together again the right way, right?
Exactly. So it's always fascinating when, people who have that ability, because it's one I do not have. That's for sure. Yeah. Good. Look, one more question looking back. What was your first deal of any type? It could have been something small when you're a kid or early in your career, whatever comes to mind.
So the first deal that I was involved with, I worked for a company that actually got purchased by a private equity company. So it was I became an expert at automation. Okay. And my first job out of school was with this company, and we were automating the making of false teeth, from it being a very labor intensive, hard thing to do, to making it so that many of the steps were automated and you could do it with a lot less people and all of that. And I remember we were working along and the company was struggling financially. And one day, these new people showed up. There were people wandering around, poking around. And then they showed up and they said, hey, there's got a new boss, a new president. And we're funding this because we believe in what's going to happen next. And that was really the beginning of my entrepreneurial career, because that president took an interest in me. And actually, along the way, we had a presentation to the board of the private equity firm that was investing in us. And my boss, who I worked for, got laryngitis. And so I had to do the presentation. And I never really presented in front of a group of people. And when I did the presentation, as usual, right, I'm doing a technical demo. And the more technical the demo is, the higher the likelihood is when supposed to do whatever it's supposed to do. It doesn't. So I'm hitting the start button. Nothing's happening. So back then there was chalkboards, right? So on the chalkboard, I draw out and I explain the whole thing. And when it was all done, he calls me into his office and I'm like, I think I might get fired. Like the thing didn't work. He's like, that was amazing. And like, I can see that you have a talent for explaining things. And we have a job opening to be the training manager for our company, our international training manager. And I would like to offer you that job. And also I'll bring you to Toastmasters because you could really, while you're good, you could be so much better. And it was one of the things that somebody did for me. And so that was really the beginning of me getting out of the office and of being an engineer and working on something to traveling around with our salespeople and meeting all the different kinds of customers in the field and helping them to close sales with, making sure the product met their needs.
Wow. So, it's funny because some people, you hear a lot of horror stories about PE, but as somebody who's done work with a lot of companies that have taken PE investment or have been acquired by PE or things like that, or working with some PE buyers as well, my experience is there are some PE investments that great and the relationship works and they put fuel on the fire. What PE is great at is saying, oh, there's something here, right? There's something here already, and we can bring money, strategic growth, expertise, right? Additional management in a way that's going to take this thing and be able to replicate it and expand it at a much quicker rate than other people. And, there's a lot of examples. Sounds like this was an example of one that was successful. Yeah.
Yeah. It was excellent for me. I think there were some parts of the company that weren't so happy with the changes, but in the long run, the company did thrive and succeed. And it wasn't having a difficult time at that point. And but byproduct was I had this great opportunity to advance my career very swiftly.
Love it. So were you around? Did PE exit that at some point? Were you still there or,
Yeah, no, I was still there, but I didn't have any carry in it at that point. But I learned a ton because I was spending time with the guy who was a president, and he was explaining how all these things work to me.
Yeah.
And it was that moment that I fell in love with business.
Yeah.
And the next job that I got, they give me stock options and brought me on as a leadership team member. And one of the conditions was they said, okay, you're really good at some things, but you need to learn how to read an income statement and a balance sheet and so on. So we'll fund you to go to classes and learn marketing, how finance works, et cetera, and operations so that you can become a more well-rounded executive. And that little piece of equity that I had in that business, it's so surprising, but it really drove me way above and beyond knowing that I had a stake in the outcome. And that company we sold to Danaher down the road. And so we had and I stuck around to watch how they applied Danaher Business Systems, which is, they're really famous for buying companies and turning them into, absolute money-making machines using this Danaher Business System model.
Love it. So, since we've sort of been doing a chronology, where'd you go from there?
So from there, I'm working for this company. It gets sold for Danaher. One of our distributors in New York, I had become really good friends with the owners, and especially the owner's son. He was actually the best man at my wedding. Okay. And his dad, when he decided to retire, offered the business to us, his son and I, as a team, because he thought we complemented each other well. And so that was the first business that I bought myself. Was this company was called Control Sales. It was in Long Island, New York. And they were maybe, I think, about $3 million in revenue, but very profitable but very old school. He had the green ledger pages to do the books. And back in the day, they had the Rolodexes, with all the business cards in the circle, and that was their CRM.
Yeah. For the really young folks, this was literally like a card file thing that rotated, a physical card file thing that rotated.
Yeah, I forget. People don't know what that is. It's kind of like talking about a cassette tape with my kids. They're like, what is that? So that business, I was able to take a lot of the things I had learned from my time with Danaher and so on, and apply those things there, automating the accounting and customer relationship management. And that was actually a pretty short stint in that we had the company maybe 2 years. We managed to double it in those 2 years. And we got an unsolicited bid from a roll-up that was doing a nationwide roll-up of companies like ours to join them. And so that traded my, 50% equity in this business for like a few percent in this rolled together entity. And that was like the next phase of my career. Was then they put me in a role, you would call it today biz dev. I went out and tried to find other companies that we could buy that would add to our roll-up.
Oh, it's big corporate development folks say, yeah.
Exactly.
So, okay. So then what did you jump into what you're doing now after that one, or was there?
Yeah. So it was a really interesting transition in that, so that company, the roll-up company, the first job I was based in New York, and we were trying to find somebody we could buy in New England. That was one of the holes in our nationwide map that we wanted to fill. So I'm going out, I interview all the various companies that we could possibly buy. And I came back with the analysis that none of them really met our criteria. They had one of two problems. Either they were just so bad operationally that it wasn't going to be a good fit with what we were doing, which was highly computerized and so on, or they had so much supplier conflict that if we bought them, they'd lose like half their revenue because we had other products that were competitive with them, right? Which is a very common problem in M&A.
Right.
And so I said, we should start a new location. This, rather than buy someone, we should start it. And they said, we've been mulling over this idea of actually, because one of the problems you have is when you're running a business and you bring on really good, talented people, they will leave and start their own business and be your competitor, right? Like that's a pretty regular thing. This is, so what we want to do is we want to shortcut that. And instead, you can stay working for us. We'll basically seed you in the market. And so what happened was they matched me up with a guy who's now been my business partner for 30 years, Wayne. And they said, you guys would make a great pair to run this business. We'll give you $1 million line of credit, which of course we had to personally guarantee, but it was $1 million line of credit. And we will buy you in 5 years for 5 times EBITDA.
Yeah.
And so we went into this business with a very clear goal in mind, right? Which was maximize year 5.
I mean, you want to talk about a clear exit plan that's been like the road's been given to you already, right?
Yeah. Well, the story has a twist, as you can imagine.
Of course.
But we knew, and we invested heavily, and with everything that we invested in, we said, it's got to meet the criteria. Is it going to optimize year 5 profit? If no, we don't do it, right? There was lots of things we said no to because this was so clear.
Yeah.
And we hired people with stock options and all the things, right? Because that was good. That was part of the package. We were able to get some talent that we probably couldn't have afforded or get without this incentive. Yeah. So that was 1998 when we took that deal.
Okay.
And of course, 2001 came around where you're almost into year 4 of the deal. We're doing pretty good. We're at a few $1 million in revenue and we're cranking along. The profits are starting to rise up. And then 9/11 happens. And like our business, just the phone stops ringing. Nobody orders things. People stop paying, right? Like there's a mass panic going on. The company that set us up goes under.
Wow.
But we still owe the personal guarantee, right? So we had to retool the whole thing. A lot of the salespeople and talent that we had brought on, when the idea that the exit was going to be who knows when, further out, we lost that talent. So we had a pretty hard reset. But Wayne and I did a little soul searching and we said, this business is good. Like we can keep this thing going. We had both moved from California to the East Coast to do this thing. And so we stuck with it and we started growing again. And we replaced those people with people who lived in the area and weren't like, waiting for a big payday. And we got momentum going and that became a great launch. So play the tape forward from 2001. By 2007, we were at about 15 million in revenue and like 2 million of EBITDA. And I went to an EO university in Montreal. And my wife was running like the customer success side of things. And Wayne and I were out selling and, we were about, a dozen people then. And I sat next to this guy, and for anybody who's an EO, Andrew Sherman, who's a deal attorney.
Sure.
And he says, we start having this conversation. He's like, oh, you can sell that company. That would be, or you can get it funded. And one of the pieces of running that company that was different than all the other things, I met this guy, Vern Harnish, in 98 when we started the business. And he was doing a presentation at that same EO university and said, I'm thinking about writing this book called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. And I have an idea. In fact, this is it, 3-ring binder with like all of his hand sketches in here for like all the things.
Love that.
So I fell in love with the idea that you could have this business model process that you could use at what was used by the most successful business people of all time. Even today, they're better wealth generators than anybody in the history of time. So we just started following that model. So if you've read the book, you know that the key to the Rockefeller success was they said, whatever industry we're going to enter into, we're going to optimize that business till it's at least 3 times the profitability of the industry that it's in.
Yeah.
So I'm an engineer. So is Wayne. Wayne's a mechanical engineer. I'm an electrical engineer. He and I worked this thing for over all those years between 1997 and 2007 to get to 3 to 5 times industry profitability. We got there. We held it there. We did a small acquisition that was an average company. We were able to bring it up to our same level of profitability. And the team's all excited. And they're like, what's next? We're like, we don't know really how to do this stuff. We don't know how to do acquisitions. And we certainly don't have enough money to go buying, we don't have millions of dollars to go buy companies. And we wouldn't know how to do it right. It would be way too much risk. And they're like, well, we need an exciting future, guys. You got to come up with something. That was the day before I went to that university. I'm sitting next to Sherman and he tells me, you can definitely do this. And so the next week we hired an investment banker and we took the company to market. We ended up with 8 bidders. And the one we picked was just such a stellar choice. It's a company called Riverside. They're based in New York City and Cleveland. At that time, they were about a $3 or $4 billion fund. And we were 100 and something in terms of the platforms that they had acquired. So they had been at this for a long time. They had a great track record. They were in the top 10% of their, funds that invested in their size. And they were able to, they were not the highest bidder, but both Wayne and I, we wanted to take a company to 100 million. We wanted that experience. So we wanted somebody who would back us getting it there. And so with all the back and forth and negotiation, we picked them and it was a great choice. They were everything that they said they were, a principled partner. They ran universities where they brought in all the executives, our head of sales, the head of finance, the head of this, the head of that, to be with peers and learn from each other. They backed us. Now, remember, they bought us. We sold 75% of the company in 2017. And when they bought us, think what happened in 2018, right? The next recession hit, right? And it was way worse than 9/11. 9/11 was steep, but short. And 2018 felt like it was going to go on forever.
Yep.
But there was 2 things that they did that were really amazing. One was when they bought us in 2017, and we were up and to the right. We were growing 100% a year, we're just on a tear. And one of the first things that they tell us in their, they have a playbook, as you can imagine, is we need to do gray to black planning. And I'm like, well, what is that? And they're like, we got to plan for disasters. So you're going to do light gray, medium gray, dark gray. Light gray is you're down 10%. Medium gray is you're down 25. Dark gray is 50. And black is no money coming in. How, what would you do to try to survive this and do it while the time? And I'm like, well, why are we doing this? I could go make sales calls and bring in more money. And they're like, no, we got to do this. But in 2001, we were in a complete panic and free fall, when that downturn happened. But they taught us, we had the plan in the drawer. When you hit DEFCON 1, you pull out this plan. When you hit DEFCON 2, and so we just perfectly executed our way through that thing. And when 2019 came and the world turned back on, we were like perfectly positioned. We had kept all our best people. We had done all the right things. We had cut all our costs and so we just were like a rocket ship after that.
It's a great example of how the right capital partner, not just capital partner, but because they bring more than capital, right? I often say that with my clients. I say, listen, you say you're looking for money, you can get money in a lot of places, right? You should be looking for more than money.
Yeah, we had some scary characters who were bidding on our business, right? At family offices and stuff where we're like, yeah, we don't want to work with them.
Yeah. Yes. And this is a great specific example of how, like, just because of their experience and what they've done over the years, where they had you do something you wouldn't have otherwise listen, being entrepreneurial, and I've shared this personally with folks that I know about myself. Like, I'm the ultimate optimist, right? And you know what? 95, maybe even 98% of the time, that's a phenomenal strength, right? But
sure.
Like anything else, whatever your biggest strength is, could be your biggest weakness, right? And that's bound me to, whether it's to stay in relationships, whether it's employees or other kind of whatever, a little too long, because I'm always like, I'm looking at the bright side of everything, right? Yeah. So, to have somebody who says, hey, Mr., forward looking, I'm going to go be a sales entrepreneur, no, we got to spend some time on this, right? And you actually use it and it's effective. That's amazing.
It was, and so like everybody that we work with, we make them do this Gray to Black plan. And we've had a couple times now where it's come in pretty handy during COVID, right, et cetera, that they feel like, oh my God, I can't believe, because they hate it. Like when you ask them to do it, they're like, why are we wasting time on this? And I'm like, trust me, one day you're going to thank me.
Right. It's one of the great things about having personal experience as an operator, as an owner, as a, somebody who's taken investment capital, whatever. You're not just, said old criticism, which wasn't always true, that, people like who can't teach, right? That was an unfair criticism in some cases, a fair one in others. But the point is, there are definitely coaches and consultants out there who've never, ever owned, built, or, scaled their business. And you obviously have that experience. So
it doesn't mean they can't teach a system, right? They can teach a system, but they don't have the pattern recognition that you get from like being in the trenches and having this stuff happen to you along the way.
That's right. And also another ability with a client who says, I don't want to do that. And you can say, not only that it's a good idea, but I personally didn't want to do that either, did it. And that's what saved, that shared experience is, the level of credibility that creates is significant.
Yeah, very much so. And, one other thing you said was like things that you don't want to do, but they make you do. The other thing that was on that checklist. So the checklist that they had for a new company that became part of their portfolio. And just to give you a backdrop, they were a 25-year-old fund. They had a 25% IRR, which essentially means that like you're basically getting 25% of your money for those who don't know that, which is very, very good. And average was 2.5 times cash on cash, right? So they were like in the top of their fund. So this checklist, the first thing was replace the CFO.
Yeah.
The second thing was do the Gray to Black planning. So you have a plan. And then third thing was you must hire a coach. As a CEO of our portfolio companies, and Wayne and I were co-CEOs at that time. So we each had to go get a coach. They said, we really don't care how much it costs, like, within reason. Pick one of the ones off of our list or go get your own. So Wayne picked one off of their list and I went out and got one of my own. And that was the most quintessential thing for us to happen, right? Was to have somebody, we were way too cheap to hire a coach. Like we were still stuck in that mindset, 5 years, 5 times EBITDA. Like we got, we squeeze every penny till it screams. And this was very foreign to us, but the coaches really changed our game because like playing any sport, having somebody watch you and help you adjust your swing or, whatever, right? Give you a workout regimen changes how you play the game in a way that you can never do on your own. And so that was also the beginnings. So if you play the tape forward, we made it through those valleys of death along the way. And in 2017, I'm thinking backwards to that, what we were talking about, that was 2008 was when the recession was, not 18. Yes. So right after they bought us. Yes. In the end, we grew 8-fold. So we doubled 8 times, like over that time from when they invested in us. And we returned roughly almost 5 times the capital back to, everybody, including ourselves, where we had reinvested the funds. So it was an unbelievably great experience working with them because they knew how to do all the things we didn't know how to do. They knew how to do mergers and acquisitions at a level like we ended up doing 7 acquisitions with them. And a couple of them were like very big. Like I would have been scared to death if it was my money. Right. We did one acquisition that was $30 million, right? And at that point we were 30 million, but we grew the business almost exactly 50% organic, 50% through acquisitions. So it was a great outcome for everybody.
I love it. Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can tell you about an incredible resource my team and I have put together for you. Secrets of Deal-Driven Growth, Creative Ways to Grow Your Business Even in Challenging Times, is a powerful ebook that helps you take DealQuest podcast episodes and apply them to your own life and business. This is the ideal tool for anyone looking for creative ways to grow as deal makers, and you can get yours now. It's as easy as heading to coreycupford.com/workbook and downloading your copy. While you're there, you can also consider joining our dynamic deal-driven community of founders, experts, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. Now back for the show. So let's talk a little bit about that process. Obviously, having somebody who has that expertise and is pushing you to do it, but it's not like you still play a role in those deals, right? They're providing the providing strategic, they're providing probably some financial analysis, due diligence, all that kind of stuff, whatever. But I mean, whether it's upfront, whether it's closing the deal, and certainly then integrating these and leveraging these acquisitions. So talk to me a little bit about like that journey, what you learned, some mistakes. I'm sure there was some, and all that kind of stuff.
So one of the things that happened pretty early on was we realized the co-CEO thing didn't really work with doing acquisitions and everything else because people didn't know who to go to. And Wayne really loved the CEO job, and I actually didn't like it that much, right? Like there were elements of it that just didn't play to my strengths. And so I said, I'll be the biz dev guy. I'm like really good at going out, meeting people and building rapport and understanding how things work. So I became our corp dev guy, right? Like I went out I mapped out the market, visited people, went to conferences, all that stuff to find the acquisitions. And I had this team of like amazing people who knew what they were doing behind me, who could read the financial statements, understand all the pieces. And I had the gut feel. Like I could tell if like something felt funny about it. I was usually right. We'd eventually find it. But working together, we lined up 50 possible acquisition targets. And I just, like every good sales guy, I just started working the funnel of seeing which ones had an interest, which ones, made sense as a strategic fit, and then beginning the process. And then once we closed, integrating them into the business model. And to be honest, the first one was a complete and utter disaster. It almost killed me, right? Because I didn't really know what I was doing at, the big scale, but I got a little better each time. And by the time I was on, number 2 and number 3, they were, much easier.
Which frankly, listen, is typical. Talk to me about like, what is some of the mistakes? So like what killed you on that first deal? What'd you learn? What are the big learnings?
So on the first one, we didn't realize that, I didn't really understand the company that we were buying was the ESOP organization. For those who don't know, that's an employee stock ownership plan. So the owner of the business had sold the business to the employees. And I'm calling on them, trying to convince them to sell to me. And he's like, look, dude, like, leave me alone. Like, I've already sold the company to the employees and we're not going back. So I go back to our private equity partners and I like, these guys are a dead end. I can't convince them to do anything. And they said, this was like, right around that 2008 period when we went through this recession. They said, a lot of ESOPs are upside down. And they're actually insolvent. And they might be one of them. And so I think you should go back to them and ask these series of questions and bring, Joe with you, who's an expert at this stuff. And oh, by the way, here's a Harvard Business Review article on like how many ESOPs are sideways. So go back and meet the guy. I give him the HB article and I said, look, I'm not going to try to force you to do anything, but I think this might still be a good deal for you. We can write a check for this business. There's no hanky panky. We've got a giant fund behind us. And I think you might want to read this stuff and then go talk to your accountant and see what's going to happen to your business. So he goes and he meets with the accountant and he finds out I'm upside down. He says, okay, I'm interested. What I didn't really understand, the big miss was this was right around Christmas time and they had just had their Christmas party and he had stood up in front of the whole company with the bad numbers that he thought were good and told them how much money they had from the business. So Corey, you've got, $700,000 worth and you've got the, 400 and whatever, right? Like it's all spread around the company. This is, a good sized business. Like I said, a $30 million business. And they all went home and told their wives or their husbands and, this is how much we have. And the reality was it was zero. Wow. So guess how happy those people were when we came in and took over.
Right, because they felt they lost something, even though it wasn't.
We took it away. We were the evil guys, right? And some people I could convince, but many I couldn't. We lost a lot of people, and it was a hard road to, recover from that. We did, obviously, because we got to the exit, but it was really hard. It was really hard lesson in that I didn't. So there was an element of the deal that I didn't understand really well. I used it, but I didn't realize what the recoil would be from that. And it was pretty ugly. So that was that deal that just about killed me.
Yeah, that's a big one. And yeah, listen, this, the ability to retain and have motivated talent, if that's a key part of the business, if they're not, if you're not talking about some tech SaaS business, whatever, where most business people matter, right?
And this mattered a lot. We were, very much a relationship selling business. It was very much a strategic sale. So the salespeople were very embedded in the customer, helping them solve the problem. And so that was a tough one. That one almost set me out the door, but I managed to scrape it together and pull through.
I love it. So we come down the line, you have a very nice exit on this company, and then you get into what you're doing now, right? So what was the motivation? I mean, listen, I could theorize, and I have a little bit of a cheat sheet because we know each other a little bit, but but obviously you had seen the value of coaching, right, for yourself and, the whole training element you had, done previously, but only, but so what had you decide is, one of the things we talked about recently, and we brought it up at the Deal Exchange Conference where you gave a great, workshop for, is that, there's this question of what people do next when they have a big exit and some are prepared and some are not. Some people even, get depressed, even if they have life with changing money. So talk to us about that transition process. Now you came to do what you're doing now.
Yeah. So we sell the company. Wayne and I are out and we had a long bucket list and I was fortunate. I still had that same coach. And one of the things that coach did with me, it was a really cool idea. He said, so I'm having my, every other week or so, I sat down with him and he hands me a piece of paper. He says, okay, you're on the final days of your working in this company. The new buyer's coming in, you guys are out. And so I want you to make a list on this page of the top, dozen or so people that really matter to you, up to 20 people. I just want you to make a list. And I'm like, well, what for? And he's like, just shut up and do it. Right. And so I make the list and he said, okay, now what I want you, one of the problems that you'll have is you're going from running this company to nothing. And that's going to be a hard transition. For me, it was a little bit easier in that if you go all the way back to to when we started the business, in 1998, we knew we wanted to build this business to sell it. So that I wasn't that attached to who I am to the business, but still it was a big transition to go from being the ruler of the universe. We had a couple hundred people by then and whatnot to nothing. So I make the list. He says, okay, what I want you to do is now reach out to all those people and plan trips with them over the course of the next thing, because you're going to start getting inbounds really fast. As soon as it's on LinkedIn that you're no longer at your company, people are going to come to you with CEO gigs, with, investment ideas, all kinds of things. And what I want you to do is fill up the first year of your, sabbatical with trips with people that you really care about. So when somebody throws a deal at you, you're like, yeah, that's great, except I can't do it for another 9 months, 12, whatever, however many months.
Really?
And most deals went away, right? Like that way. So I didn't get sucked into do anything. We want you to be on this board. Oh, I've got a trip planned on this thing. So made it easy for me to say no. But after like a year and a half of, I did that and, also a bunch of bucket list stuff, I was getting pretty bored. There's not too many people. I was only 50, right? So there's not too many people to play with in the middle of the day that aren't really, really old. And on, middle day on weekdays. But also I missed really the intellectual stimulation of the work.
Yeah.
But what Wayne and I both knew was that we didn't want to do what we didn't need to do what we did before. And we really didn't want to have all these people and all this leverage and debt and a boss and, all of those things, or investors that were going to be, bothering you about stuff all the time.
Yeah.
We said, remember the coaches? What they did was really cool. Let's do that, right? Help other people do what we did.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where the free scale coaching came from. And the idea was most people, when you look at the world, most people start a business because they want freedom, right? They work for somebody who's a jerk, or they just see that what they're doing, they could do somewhere else or do it themselves and get to keep all the money, et cetera. So they start with this idea of freedom. This is all in the E-Myth book, right? And the reality is you actually are good at it. So you'll start to get customers, but pretty soon you get overwhelmed with all the complexity. So we wanted to help people build a business where you can scale the business, but also scale your freedom at the same time. Mm-hmm. And we define freedom as that you're working on the things you want to work on, not for me, dealing with spreadsheets is torture, right? But every man's got their thing. And so this allowed us to be in our zone of genius, which for me and for Wayne, we both around this idea of let's figure out what's a really differentiated strategy, something that builds a moat around this business and makes us sticky to our customers, makes them love us, figuring out that puzzle of how to do that in an economical way.
Yeah.
Right. That we loved. We loved finding really talented people and teaching them and watching them advance and make bigger and better decisions, along the way. We loved that. And we loved figuring out how to make the machine of a business become more efficient and more effective over time, looking for where the friction is and removing that friction. And so if we could do that all day long of the days we're working, that would be perfect. And we don't want to mortgage our houses to make payroll or deal with, angry employee, whatever, right? So it's I always say it's like being a grandparent, right? You come in, you hang out with the kid, you teach them stuff, but at the end of the day, you give them back to the parents, right? To go drive them to school and do all the other things that are out there. So that's what we've been doing now for the last almost 10 years. Wow. We've coached about 55 companies through their, from wherever they are to where they want to go. And we help build a bridge. And to your point about the exit, one of the things that we do is if that's their goal that they want to exit, part of our process is we make them write a letter to themselves, a vivid vision of what they want their life to look like when we've accomplished all these things. And they've got the big bank account. What's your calendar look like? How are you, where are you living? What's the environment like? What are your rituals that you have? How do you feel? Right? All those things. And write this letter from the future to themselves so that together, us and them, we can take them on this journey to where they want to end up. And by being on the same page about what that looks like, when they do stuff that's incongruent with a path to there, we get the license to kick them in the teeth and go what? Right. Corey, you said you wanted this and now, but you're doing this. I don't understand. Did you not mean it? Or are you just not noticing that you're drifting off course? Because lots of entrepreneurs love shiny pennies. And actually, when their business is running smoothly and there's no crisis, like that drives them crazy. So they go and find a crisis.
Yeah. And it's interesting, when you said shiny penny as well, is that one dynamic? Yeah, well, they'll find the crisis. Absolutely. Because that's what it drives them to solve this up or whatever it is. The other one that's interesting to me, I'd love you to talk about this because I've had a conversation with a couple of people. One of them is my wife and one of them is, someone else.
Does your wife think you like shiny pennies?
And my wife's an entrepreneur and she is in this very fortunate but challenging position. I think it's talked about a lot less. And I've been there as well, and I'm still there, but I've gotten better at it, which is that, like, okay, if we have problems we got to focus on, right? Everybody has a lot of advice and input on problems, right? A lot fewer people can relate to the fact that some of us are blessed at various times to have a lot of opportunities, right? Mm-hmm. And how opportunities can actually be a distraction, right? Because if you have that vivid vision that you talked about in this goal, whatever, well, it's like that shiny penny over there or that sparkling thing over there. And it's, poor person to any opportunities. But if you really think about it, like these opportunities can sometimes throw you off course. And frankly, I'll go another step and then I want you to step in. I believe, at least this has been my experience, sometimes these opportunities are such an easy way to avoid the really harder stuff that will get me really where I want to be. And there are so many fewer people who are ever going to call you out on taking a great opportunity or what seemingly they would consider a great opportunity that is actually taking you away from the thing you should really be doing because a lot of people don't have those great opportunities. So who's going to call you on that, right? So I'd love you to weigh in on that.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple pieces, there's an awful lot to unpack in there, but if you kind of start with just the front end, for most CEOs, they don't have anybody who's calling them out on their thoughts. Yeah. And one of the challenges as the CEO of a company is you might just be wondering about something. Like, I wonder if we opened up an office in the Bahamas, what would happen, right? Like, or I think it's a great opportunity. I just read in the paper that like Bahamas is like, okay, one, how does that fit into your, if you don't have anybody to ask these questions, like, so Corey, you said you want this over here and over that, and that isn't squaring with the path. Like, so do you really want to change course? And so that's one piece of the puzzle. The second part is, and this was something that I learned being partnered with Wayne, because Wayne was very good. I was good. I'm the idea guy. So in the EOS world, you call it a visionary and an integrator. Yes. Like, I would go to conferences, I would learn stuff, I'd come back and I'd be like, wait, we should go this way, right? We've been going that way a long time and we have a really clear plan for that way. Yeah. And he would like say, okay, what are we not going to do? Right? We have a plan. The plan's laid out. Everybody's got goals. They're all fully loaded as we can make them. So what thing of all those things are we going to stop doing to make room for this? That killed about half my ideas right there. Right. But then let's just say I had a good excuse or a good reason. Now the next part was, who's going to do it? How long will it take? And the real critical questions are, what's the stage gates we're going to put into place that if we're not at X by Y, we're going to pull the plug on this project? Because hardly anybody does that because they're excited. Nobody wants to talk. It goes back to like the gray and black plan. Nobody wants to talk about like, what's the risks when we do this? And that's where a coach or a business partner that is got that view of the world is like, look, I've just made this most beautiful plan to build, the Taj Mahal, and, you want to build a garage over there. Like, I don't understand how this is going to square together. And the nice thing about that, the people who are that way was that if I could convince him, if I could make it through his gauntlet of questions to get to a yes, nobody could craft a plan like Wayne could, build that garage if we decided that was the thing. So having somebody who can call you out on that is a really critical element. And probably one of the best things that the coach did for me was when I said, I'm going to go do some new thing, they're like, what did Wayne say? He would say, oh, I'm told. Right. Like, oh, you got to need to talk to Wayne first and then come back if it makes it past Wayne. And that helped an awful lot along the way.
I love it. Both ends of that are very, I've had coaches and also I'm a visionary like you. I've got my executors, operators, whatever, different of these models call them different things, but integrators, but they're the people who get stuff done, the visionary, and yeah, I experienced the same thing. And then one other dynamic that one of my people says to me all the time, and it's become a joke. I come in with a new thing, whatever, and she goes through all the other stuff you talk about. And then she'll also say to me, okay, and remember, you probably only understand 6 of the 27 that it takes to get this done, right? Because there's all this stuff that happens behind the scenes that me as a visionary has no idea that the team is doing to make that happen, or that even needs to be done.
Yeah. Oh no. As a business grows, the ripple effects of change are big, right? Let's say you're a software as a service business and you decide to add a feature, that creates work for 20 teams in the company. The product team needs to figure out how to build it. Engineering has to figure out how to build the infrastructure for it to work. Customer, success has to figure out how to onboard people to this new thing. Sales has to figure out how to sell it. Marketing has to figure out how to message it. Finance has to build it into their budgets and operating model. And operations needs to be able to deliver on it, right? So one small thing I want you to move the button from here to here, or make it so you can change the screen color, turns into thousands of hours of work for somebody, to use an example.
Yeah. Love it. All right. I want to, even though we're running a little longer than usual here, I just, we can go forever. We're not going to do that. I want to hit one more quick topic before I ask you my final 2 questions. So I think you can have, good insight in this, which is that one of the things I've talked about a lot on this show is there's a lot written and a lot of materials out there on the difference between an employee and an entrepreneur, employee mindset, entrepreneur mindset, things like that. But one of the things I talk about often is there's also a different mindset of a deal maker, right? And you, as somebody who's grown a business, you mentioned the business you grew and exit, was 50% organic and 50%, right, inorganic, deal driven, right? From the point of view of your experience, but also obviously coaching, right, companies now. What is that? What do you think it is? Because there are companies that can grow fully organically, but if you look at most companies that have grown significant scale and get top exit dollars, they've done both, right? And I think everything starts with mindset. So in coaching folks, do you find that some of your folks are doing nothing in terms of deals or inorganic growth, and that there's a mindset shift? And talk to me about that whole thing.
So yes, there's lots of folks who don't see it as a path. They think the only way to do it is to go it alone. And one of the tricks or tools that we've found over the years that really works well to bring out what might be the opportunities in the world. One of the companies I did some coaching, I coached for a while, is a company called Strategizer, right? They wrote the business model canvas.
Yeah.
So I coached them for a little while and I learned a lot, and I learned their system of how to use it. So when I meet somebody who's a potential client, or when we are bringing together groups of the leadership teams of clients, what we do is we have them draw out visually the map of how this company exists in the world. So you put yourself at the center and what's your value proposition for your customer, and then you look at what are the supply chains and the distribution channels and your financing and all the elements of the business, how it all fits. Then you put your competitors in there and which things do they share. And what you start to get is this view of the world of how I fit into this bigger ecosystem. Yeah. And now through that and looking at how much deal flow there is or money flow between the different elements, you can start to zone in and say, what if we bought these guys? What would we gain? How do these lines move around if we make this common move? Easy ones are like geographic expansion, right? So maybe you're like the world's best, bagel shop. Well, okay, let's expand to the next county or the next state, et cetera. That's a natural one where you don't have to build all the infrastructure if you can buy people who already have it. Et cetera. So that's another element of it. And third, which is often overlooked, but I think is really important, is talent, right? Because the very best talent is locked in to the place that they're working, right? They got stock options. They're making a big fat paycheck, which would be hard for somebody who's ramping up to get paid that much, et cetera. So for example, one of the companies that we bought in our journey was we bought it because we wanted that CEO to replace us. We knew he was the world's best salesman we had ever seen. Way better. I've prided myself at being pretty good at it. And this guy kicked my ass all day long, right? So we knew that we wanted that guy selling our company for the second bite of the apple. And so we bought that company mostly because he came with it. And it turned out to be totally worth it. Not to mention we got a geography with it and a whole bunch of other pieces that we were, and product line that we didn't have before. So it wasn't just that, but that was the first part, was like, where are we going to find a CEO that can run this thing and be an amazing salesperson to help us get the best value we could when we flipped it to another private equity fund after. And we got, he played a big role in the multiple we got. So
love it. Love him. So Rich, before I ask my final question, where can people find out more about your services?
So we have a website, freescalecoaching.com. So you can check us out there. There's a link on the website. You can go to a YouTube channel. What we've done over the years is we've recorded Zoom calls just like this one, where we interview our clients at various stages of our process. And you can kind of hear from them firsthand what they like. And also we ask the question of like, what should somebody be afraid of if you work with us? And they articulate some of that too, because we're not a fit for everybody, right? So you can find all that information there.
Love it. So my final question on the podcast is always about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And it's funny because you talked about it earlier, but I want, so as opposed to just what you teach clients about this, like, on a personal level for you at this stage, I'd love your answers. So for me, freedom means everything from freedom around the world for people from oppression to why I've been an entrepreneur for decades and haven't had a boss. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
I'd say it's been a huge driving factor pretty much my whole life. So I grew up very blue collar. Everybody in my neighborhood was a cop or a garbage man or a construction worker, whatever. So there was very, very little freedom. In my high school graduating class, maybe 5% went to college. So when I went in through the military initially, and that's where I got to start to meet people who actually had that freedom and start to see that there were other ways that you could live in traveling overseas. And I was like, oh, that's it. If I flash back, remember I told you that my boss had laryngitis and I'd get this job as training manager. So I'm working at this company and I'm flying to all over the world, to China, to the Middle East, to Africa, you name it. And the person who picks me up in the car at the airport to take me around is a sales guy. And that sales guy's wearing nice clothes. They got an expense account. They're driving a fancy car and they've got a cell phone. I'm like, oh my God, how do I get that job? Right? Versus the one I have, which I love training people, but like they were really living it. And so that was like the first thing I was like, oh, they have freedom, financial freedom. They also have freedom in that they choose their schedule and they pick. And so that really attracted me in that, because I got to get really good at sales. And so I spent a lot of time, I went to all the training programs, Zig Ziglar and, Napoleon Hill, and read every book and said, that's going to be my next journey.
Love it.
And so that's my driving thing. And now it's freedom for my kids and freedom for our society. One of the best things, what I love about this job is I believe that these, small to mid-sized businesses are the backbone of the country. And if you're a small business, a startup, there's all kinds of resources for you. There's, incubators and venture studios and all these things, right? And books and so on. And if you're a really big company, you've got Deloitte and Accenture and all these consultants and, et cetera, and lots of books on how, do management at, a high level, Harvard Business Review, all that stuff. In the middle, there's almost nothing. And when I call middle, it's like between 10 and 250 million. There's very little resources for those folks. There's a book out there called No Man's Land that's written by Doug Tatum that's about this segment. Like there's just not a lot of help there. So that we've dedicated ourselves to that space of, somewhere in the double-digit millions to the 3-digit millions. Like, how do you scale yourself through that?
and get freedom along the way, right?
Get you freedom along the way. Exactly.
I love it. Richard Manders, thanks for being such a great guest on the Deal Quest podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's fun chatting with you. I'm sure we'll be chatting more.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Deal Quest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. If you are interested in finding out more about my law firm, the services we provide to entrepreneurial and growing companies across industries all over the country, and my partner Brian Megan and I, and my amazing team, just head over to kupferlaw.com. That's kupferlaw.com. And if you want to follow more of my content, head over to my LinkedIn page where I post regularly. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your Deal Quest will bring.